Hey, everybody. Guess what? That's right. It's Monday night. That means it's time for Disputed Lands. I'm your host, Chad Schaefer. Ian is still hard at work. He may join us here again a little bit later. As you know, his job hours have kind of changed a little bit, and so he's trying to work that out. So bear with him. Ian will join us again here someday in the future. Uh, Tonight we're joined by a good friend of mine who I got to meet face to face for the first time after knowing and listening to him for quite a while in Ohio back in September, or yes, it was July, back in July this last year now at the Go Therefore conference that Mike Spalding hosted. And Mark is one of those guys that I just love to listen to, not only for his accent, because let's just face it, the accent to us, our American ears, is just like cream in coffee. It's like you take a good thing and then you add something better to it. And but Mark is he's he's a director, he's art director, a producer. He's all these things, but if you notice the tagline that I kind of put there on Facebook, I think the one thing other than being a faithful servant that overall describes him from my perspective is activist. The emphasis on active. He is someone who is not idle and is constantly pushing back. I would say pushing back against the forces of darkness that seek to invade his home. Both locally and then, of course, social media wise, because of his voice, Mark often finds himself in trouble with the social publishing. He's been banned more than once from Facebook, put in timeout, Facebook jail and Twitter jails and all these other things just because he doesn't shut up and he likes to speak the truth. And I don't think you're going to shut this man up. So without further ado, Mark, welcome to Disputed Lands. Thanks for joining us.
It's an absolute pleasure, Chad. And listening to your very kind words is frankly rather embarrassing, really, because I don't really recognize that person, but I appreciate, I genuinely appreciate that. But yes, it's just past 2:00 in the morning here in London in the UK. So yes, pushing back. What have we been up to? We, as you know, as a nation, let's just cover this. So, June 2016, 17,410,752 people, with a majority of over 1 million, voted to leave the European Union. The fact that we'd been taken in to this construct without any formal vote in 1973, we were taken in to a socialist construct where it is not democratic. We are a democracy, you are a representative republic. There is a distinct difference. You have an electoral college for a reason, even if a number of your fellow countrymen, particularly in Oregon, particular governor, are trying to do whatever you can, if they're Democrats, to undermine the electoral college. I don't say that to be sort of butter you up or blow blue smoke up your backside, as you say on the other side of the pond there, which is a phrase I love, is the fact that it's, we have to know our history and we have to know what's happened. So we took a democratic vote, we left, and then we've been in the civil war until last December, Chad.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that here in a little bit. We'll save that for the second half of the show. Mark, I want people to know who you are. So let's just start very simple. How did you come to be the Mark Sutherland you are today? When did you confess a faith in Christ, and was it in your youth? Was it later on in your age? What?
It was in my youth, Chad. Hopefully, I'm still in my youth.
Well,
but I
guess in face of eternity.
I know. I hear you, brother. So when I was 18 years of age, I became a Christian. I went down this place called church, which I was not brought up really in a Christian home, even though I was told that when I was older, I could make up my mind. I made up my mind, and my parents didn't really like that. I remember one night being kicked out of the house for that. So there we go. So it's been interesting. There is a Christian roots within the family, say from my grandmother. So I became a Christian at 18. I'm someone who had like struggled at school. At the age of 16, felt I was a complete irrelevance in society. And then I became a Christian at 18. I then discovered books and reading. I like to read a heck of a lot of stuff. And that really gave me the impetus to do that in regard to education and all the rest. So by the time I was 21, I went back to college. I did an OND and an HND in furniture production management. And jumping ahead, I've spent 13 years in secondary education. I then am trained as a teacher. I'm a carpenter by trade. I use those skills now. So I trained to work in a secondary education situation, and I ended up in a pupil referral unit for expelled children. But in 1992, jumping back, I worked on my first feature film. I designed a feature film that went into 35 cinemas in this country, a complete and utter pile of rubbish. But it's mentioned in books and dispatches. And I did a few clever set builds, to say the least, having to build the hallway of a house in my friend's garage, all this kind of stuff that I've forgotten about, but did loads of stuff like that. And then I've always had, that gave me in 92 when I did that, just before I trained to be a teacher, Chad. I haven't spoken about this for ages. It's quite fun. That I then just totally fell in love with wanting to make films. And then I have constantly worked. And then what I did, I worked out my way out of the teaching profession. God took me out of that. I ended up teaching in a theatre. But my passion is films. My passion is media. So I've been all over the place in that sense.
Yeah, and we have one of your short films. You have a few shorts out, and one of them is scrolling on the screen now. The link is in below in YouTube, so don't go watch them now. We're doing a live show. You don't watch them now. Just know that they're there, or search them in your browser on your secondary browser there.
That's very kind of you. And I'll just quickly talk about that. So Between Lambs and Lions. So in 2013, and I can't grab the copy, but I have a library of books around here, and I have a number of books about American politics. So in 2013, I was led to read a book by Pamela Geller and Robert Spencer called The Post-American President, which was a complete and utter critique on Barack Hussein Obama. So if we go back in 2010, so you say the person I am now, I got kicked out of a church. I don't say that with a load of glee because it wasn't very pleasant, but I challenged the control freak who was running the place. There seems to be a lot of those anyway. And it was about trying to fit in, where you were trying to fit in as a husband, father, blah into church and all this kind of thing. I sort of failed in that regard. So I found myself kicked out. I ended up in another place for a couple of years. I only lasted for that. But I walked in and I met a dear friend of mine who is an Anglican vicar, Church of England vicar. And he said, well, you like making films? And I went, yes. He said, well, do you know about the Dolce Wars? And I went, excuse me. He said, look this up. And basically he showed me a connection via Steve Quayle's website. And then I went, oh. And then I looked on other stuff, and then basically I've been down this rabbit hole ever since. I grabbed my Bible, started going down, and the verses that completely and utterly changed my paradigm, changed my life, are Genesis 6 verses 1 to 8 about the Watchers coming down to earth and having sex with women and the Nephilim and the giants and all that. So then, as the wonderful Chuck Missler said, the Old Testament is the New Testament concealed, and the New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. And then suddenly, and I don't sit here as a biblical scholar, and it's something that I need to do more, is read my Bible and all the rest even more. But I don't sit here as a biblical theologian or expert. But I then began to see things totally through that prism. It changed my life. It's caused a lot of upset in my life, in the fact that it does put you at complete odds by what we call the church and sort of churchianity here. which is in, not in a very good shape. So then I started looking at all this stuff. I started following people online, whether I was looking at L.A. Marzulli, Derek and Sharon, Gilbert, blah, 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 and Steve Quayle's site. I'd be regularly on, and I would be listening to Hagman and Hagman. And these people, of course, as you know, and some of them are friends of mine now, they have worldwide audiences. And as I would say, that you are incredibly blessed by what's coming out of the United States in this regard. So it's not you, Chad, personally, or any other friends. Also, the US church-wise has exported some stuff that we really don't want, e.g., whether that's the kind of diatribe like Rick Warren and the purpose-driven drivel and all this kind of thing. And what it is that when you go down the rabbit hole and you investigate these people, like him having Peter Drucker, this big management guru, as his mentor and all the rest, and this guy is studying, massive churches and all this kind of thing. When you start looking at all the church history, you start looking at what's going on, you start watching the stuff about the Frankfurt School and all this kind of stuff, and you're tuning in. You've been really, really blessed by what is coming out of your nation, and your nation is a lifeline to people like myself, to others. So then, as I think dear friends of ours are watching this now, so I give a shout out to Audrey and Brian from Canada, if you're watching this and what I'm about to say. So you then turn around and go, I was supposed to go to a Hear the Watchman conference in 2016. I didn't make it for various spiritual battles this side of the pond. Then in 2017, I got on a plane. I'd reached the point in regard to my own personal mental health that I thought I was going mad because of what I was looking at.
I've been there.
Yeah, you've been there.
I've been there.
This didn't add up. The fact that we start, can we talk about UFOs? Can we talk about extraterrestrials? Can we talk about Aleister Crowley over here, one of the most evil men that ever lived in this country? And on all, if not the world, and all these links, what's coming, the deception. And so I got on a plane and I walked into the Hear the Watchman in Dallas to confirm that I wasn't going around the bend. And that's part of my recent testimony over the last couple of years, because it has been extremely costly. It is extremely costly. And people, or a number of people around the world know that. I'm not going to go into that. But the fact is that then a number of these people then become friends of mine. And then what it was is Between Lambs and Lions, by making this film, so it quickly jumped about, Between Lambs and Lions depicts a time when the Constitution of America has been suspended and there's complete overreach by the executive branch, and it's 10.5 minutes, and it takes the book of Daniel and it sets it amongst the political machinations of Washington politics. I wish I could say that it's got thousands and thousands of hits, but on YouTube and Vimeo it's hit over 20,000. Please go and watch it. Please share it. But it is suppressed because we are censored. But I made that film. I was led to make that film. And then that opened up contacts for me in America in a way that I would never have dreamed. And I have a number of close friends on your side of the pond. And in October 2018, I found myself on a plane going off, having been to Dallas 2017. I was there in 2018. I was there last year. I'll be there this year. That's the plan. Then October 2018, I found myself on a plane going to Montana to speak at an event. Walked in the room. There's Ammon Bundy in the room. There's incredible guy, his family, and amazing people like Jeanette Finicum and Alex Newman and Matt Shea, the politician in Spokane in Washington State, who's under a lot of, needs our prayers, who's under a lot of attack and hit pieces by Rolling Stone magazine. And that was quite an amazing experience to be at that conference, because it's when the Southern Poverty Law Center, I then met this group who I'm fully aware of, and we had a hit piece by The Guardian, which actually backfired on them. So it was an amazing conference in that regard, about actually praying about the press and where you're going to put them, and we'd put them in a particular position nation at this conference, and then we prayed around this table, and God answered our prayers because the speakers called the press out, especially with what they've done to the Bundy family, especially what they did to the Finnecan family with Lavoie and Jeanette. So I spoke there, and then you and I met. You and I met in Ohio when I spoke at the conference there, and talking about a bit the history of this nation and what's been going on politically. Why am I sort of this person now is because, and I've co-produced a lot of short films. I've won awards in America. I've won an awards over here for that. And I'm presently I'm part of a little team where we've been trying to get a Christian faith-based feature film off the ground, which is Orbiter the movie, and hopefully I'll put a link to a little concept trailer there. And we're getting closer to doing that. That's been a fight. When you put crowdfunding up and Facebook take it down and Twitter, your Twitter banned, and there's all this ghosting, this is real. And of course over here, politically, people then think that, oh, this isn't real. And also going back, the other thing is, you say, why am I the person? What made me then now is I made my small contribution to saying that we needed to get out of the EU. I made something called Flexit the movie, the definitive guide to the UK leaving the EU and defending its economy. And then you have the parallels between that and your presidential race in 2016, and that's why my little film, I made that as my contribution to try and wake America up to what was going on, because the parallels, I've constantly talk about this.
And I wanted to mention that. Yeah, that's a good segue. Is that you mentioned all the time, and you've mentioned before the parallels between the UK and the United States, not only politically, but spiritually in the church. And that's what we're going to talk about in the second half of this. But there's a number of parallels you push out. The first one, like, unfortunately, you've made most mention of Flexit, the movie, is about that split in what is happening in the UK there. And one of the things that I know you emphasize, and you will say it here, I'm gonna jump ahead of you, is we can't be, we need to look up. The scriptures say, look up for your redemption draws nigh, but we also need to look up, to look across the pond.
Yes.
And as you told me before, the show, we need to get out our maps and look at them and realize that the United States isn't the only country on there. There's several others, and not to forget about our brothers. But what I wanted to simply point out is that your strength has been your ability to clearly see and to speak about the parallels between the UK, both politically and spiritually. And so, as you mentioned, that you have this political, which none of this is without spiritual battles going on. Right? We understand that.
Yeah, it is.
They're intertwined.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where the mistake to me is made, or the criticism, and one of my pet peeves, where we talk about Ephesians 6, and people constantly say to me, well, you just politicize everything. And I say, no, the spiritual battle is manifesting itself in the political arena. Just be grateful that isn't going to, AR-15s yet and a load of machetes, because that's the next stage. And now politics is there for people to have discourse without going to arms. But arms are important because they defend a constitution and they defend against a tyrannical government. And the thing is that your wonderful piece of paper written in 1787, I believe, which is in the 1700s, is this wonderful piece of paper that stands in the way of the totalitarian, progressive, leftist, globalist, new world order takeover. That is what people is pushing around the world. And the reason why there's a parallels, and the reason why I look to you, is because it's been said that if America goes down, then the whole of Western civilization goes down. Now, whatever people think of, and I need to say this, that whatever people think of the President of the United States, who is not perfect, and nor am I. Just say that, nor am I. The bottom line is this, is that the election of Donald J. Trump has brought out your swamp, has revealed what has been going on in Washington, and has woken all of you up. You were waking up to this. You were waking up to this under Barack Hussein Obama and those 8 years and all the Tea Party and all the rest. You were waking up. The deep state, it's real. Now, all those parallels, just quickly, the parallels are really important because in regard to the Steele dossier, in regard to spying on the Trump campaign, our country has been complicit in this. It has, all that info has then come from here. The Five Eyes, GCHQ, has been used in this, even though old MPs like Alan Duncan would then deny that, even though they gave a press release in March 2017, having a go at Andrew Napolitano, which is quite funny. But that's where these parallels are, and I don't mean to be insulting when I say to Americans, please get a map out. What I'm saying is, you defend your borders. Please look over the borders, because we need you. But actually, do you know what? We need each other. Canada needs you. We need each other. We look at what's happening in Australia. There are people awake all over the world. We are discovering that. And the fact is, and I've been through this. This is not a hobby. This is not a hobby. This is life and death. And that's why we then have dear friends in Canada pulling their hair out over what Trudeau is doing, because we see what the New World Order is doing with various regions around the world, various countries. It's experimenting. It's seeing how far people will take it, how far people will push. We then go through what's been happening in Europe and all the rest, with all these constant wars creating mass migration deliberately. There's another rabbit warren there to go down, but these are the parallels of this pushback in regard to populism, whether that's voting for Trump, whether that, voting for Boris Johnson, whether that's voting for Scott Morrison in Australia, whether that's also voting for Balazo, wow, I just murdered his surname, in Brazil. People are waking up and saying, we say this as Christians, Jesus will return to judge us individually, but is going to return to judge nations, to judge the nations. And the number one thing is that the enemy doesn't want is nations. That's why there's a huge, the EU is in fact a state. It thinks itself as a separate state, had a constitution ratified in a roundabout backhanded way in 2009 under the Lisbon Agreement. If you get rid of countries, then you get rid of borders, then you get rid of, someone else said this clever than me, then you get rid of the state of Israel. The other thing is, I'm shocked where in your country, we can't believe that over the last 3 years, young people have been taking the communist flag and taking it on the streets. There's been an element of that in Canada. We have just had a wonderful, a victory in the fact that this total socialist, communist, Trotskyist, Leninist idiot Corbyn, who leads the Labour Party, was trying to win. And fortunately, Boris Johnson got an 80-seat majority. Now, here's another plug. I then have another short film, the Iris Echo, which I need to work out how to get out more there publicly, because it's on someone else's website and not mine, as I'm trying to rebuild it. But the key thing is, our latest film is about communism. Suddenly, communism is coming real, because that's what the New World Order, along with using Islam, my enemy's enemy is my friend, to suppress people, to suppress free speech. So all of these are real. All these parallels are real, especially for you guys in Minnesota, when you've got people like Ilhan Omar and all the rest. So you import, sorry, uncomfortable thing to say, you allow various people to come in, and then you create a body of people that are actually going to vote for people like that. Or what's it take, the four women there. So these parallels are the same. You see what's going on in Europe. That's why we're warning you. And one interesting conversation I constantly have with friends of mine in America is when they define their political engagement. And actually, for a number of people, there was no political engagement really before 2007, 2008. That's interesting, isn't it? Because Barack Hussein Obama became president, I think, was it 2008? So it's really, really interesting how suddenly things began to engage.
Yeah, one of the things that we've been talking about the state of the church the last 2 weeks on this show, and we had actually Mike Spalding on last week to carry on a conversation that he had the previous week about the state of the church in the U.S. and you talking about people waking up in 2008. It's an interesting thing. I say wake up. There are a lot of people who let me just speak for what would be considered the heartland of the U.S., right? What they term the flyover states, where I'm at. They call them,
which is an insult.
The middle part of it is the insult. Is that these are the hardworking people. All they've wanted to do their whole lives is to get up in the morning, to work hard, put food on the table, and to live their lives, without trying to hassle anybody. Right? This is the normal thought process. And the most of the time they're not looking for the fight, so they are quiet most of the time. And because of their Christian faith, they even take a lot of stuff on the chin, right? And say, you can't change people some people who are going to be just idiots. They're just ignorance and morons, and that's the truth. There are people who are like that. They're just ignorant and they're morons. The Lord has to deal with them. And they deal with it. But you're right. The sense that it has gone beyond someone who was just being an ignorant fool who would be gone the next day to an ignorant fool who's trying to set up his camp in your yard, then you can't let that continue. You can't let that abide.
No.
The problem is that they've been silent for so long. They've forgotten most of us how to fight. They've forgotten that there is, as I was saying before the show, there war is on every side. And if it's the camel's nose under the tent, right? You give them an inch, and before you know it, the whole the whole tent's coming down. And there are a lot of people who have that wisdom here in the United States. The sad thing is, as you said, it's they're needles in haystacks in the size of their voices. Now, thankfully, I believe that is changing because of programs like the ones you've mentioned, people like yourself, like this show, encouraging people to just simply stand up where they are, to be a voice with the gift they've been given, and you can push back to these people, because the truth of the matter is, and they know it. I mean, you think of Plato's Republic, right? You got the elite, the protectorate, and the military, right? The protectorate, the military, and then you have the vulgar or the everyday people, right? You've read, you know what I'm talking about, right? The three classes of people. You have the elite, the protectorate, the people put in power to protect that power, and then the mass majority. And the elite have always known they are outnumbered, and they have always operated with the fear that if the masses wake up and if the protectorate agree with the vulgar, then they're done. And they've seen that happen, right, in your history, particularly with it comes to monarchies and kings and stuff. They've seen what happens when a people will rise up. And they end up on the long end, the long end of a rope, right? And they know that can happen, and that all we have to do is to be a voice wherever you are, and you don't have to be on you don't have to be on the national level. You don't have to be a mayor or a governor of a state or a country to be a voice to put a stop or to put a roadblock in the way of these progressive folks who are trying to overrun us.
Mm.
That brings us here to what I wanted to talk about, the second half of the church, talking about the status of the church. We've been discussing how the LGBTQ movement is being used as the tip of a spear here in the United States to undermine our Christian nation and the moral values and stamina of a people who would resist evil. This is being used as the spear to tear that down and to tear it apart. But what about the parallels? What are the parallels of this in the UK?
Well, absolutely, the parallels are huge. Quickly going about to the state of the church, and God willing, we will still go ahead and do this, which would be amazing, because as Mike Spalding and I in the past have discussed, in 1776, he wrote, he didn't write the book in 1776. He wrote it, I think, 2 years ago, which was "Let's Make American Pulpits Great Again." And he asked me to write a little testimonial in it, and I said that the regiment that the British feared was a black and white robed regiment, which was the preachers in the pulpits. That is the regiment that the British feared, and we'd love to do a little film about that. I've got that all planned out in my head. So, and it's something that we'd love to do maybe in the summer. So they're the parallels in the past for you. Now, the fact that you get this situation where 5013Cs and all this kind of thing, and sort of trying to shut your voice down, and it's your best life now, Joel Osteen, let's just name these people, and all this kind of nonsense. The parallels of this recently in the last few days, the last few weeks, we've just had, Not My Christianity Today magazine, this leftist pile of rubbish, the Galley, the editor who resigned, laying into the president of the United States. We're then, and here's an article here. This is from November 2016. I went in to do an interview. This is Tony Campolo, going on about the fact that what's the problem with Hillary Clinton's emails and all this kind of thing. I'm not saying this for effect. What I'm saying is that this has been in play for a long, long time. So what are the parallels? The parallels of this: you're over there, the Methodist Church is about to divide on the issue of sexuality. In what we didn't write the Bible. I didn't write the Bible, nor did you, Chad. And I'm a sinner just like everyone else. But the fact is, it's clear about everything. And it's not because it's going to be, it's unloving and all this kind of thing. But the fact is that, as Jesus said, well, we know the day of your return, as in the days of Noah. That's why the flood came. It's a very, very, it's not a nice subject to talk about, cross genetics and people having sex with various things that they shouldn't do and all this kind of thing. And this is what the Bible's laying out. Now, the parallels are, so the Methodist Church is going to split. It's going to be, those people that are LGBTQ and all this, and supporting all that. And then there'll be the other church that actually goes, this is what the Bible says. We're not having any out of Bible experience. So we're actually going to stand on this. Now, the parallels here. So the Archbishop of Canterbury, let's go back. We'll go back to David Cameron, previous Prime Minister, because we seem to be going through quite a lot of Prime Ministers. We had David Cameron, then we've had Theresa May.
I've noticed that. You can't keep one in the chair.
Absolutely. So we had Boris Johnson. Then before that, we had Theresa May, as I call her. And then before that, we had David Cameron, who... thank God, then said that we could have a referendum, even though Mr. Tusk and various other people in the EU hate his guts for doing so.
Well, he saw, I think, at the time, the writing on the wall that really there was a stirring, thankfully, within the people there who they had brought to that point where they couldn't keep the idiot in the room anymore, and they were saying we can't
absolutely
we can't have this, or we're going to end up ruined.
Absolutely, because Farage, bashing on about that for 25 years, then you
Right.
morph into UKIP, which basically is they are conservatives, but they were conservatives who turn around and say we need to leave the EU. So all of that going on. So within the Anglican Church now, so if we go back to David Cameron, I'm trying to think off the top of my head whether that's 2012. You then had an archbishop then called Rowan Williams. He was also a Druid, yes, and he, seemed to have no problem with the fact that maybe would have to look about the fact that maybe we could have polarity with Sharia courts and Sharia law and all this kind of thing. A very infamous speech, and that was slightly touched on in Parliament. He then talked about the fact the Church of England needed to, basically get a bit modern. David Cameron said, get with the program. Right now,
Right.
Get with the program meant. So the Archbishop of Canterbury was changed. Someone like Welby comes in, and everyone thinks, oh, that's fine. He's an evangelical, background, I think, at either, which is interesting. I'm not sure whether he worked at GTHQ at one point or MI5, but he was in the oil industry. We just wonder. And then he was an Eton boy as well, David Cameron, Eton boy, and all this kind of thing. So he was then put in as Archbishop of Canterbury. But this is whole thing about get with the program. And now we've reached the point where we now have the Archbishop of York, who is number 2 in the C of E, a guy called Stephen Cottrell, is coming in, and he is pro-gay marriage. And of course, gay marriage is something that David Cameron brought in, which was quite shocking because, supposedly a conservative. He's not a conservative. He's a liberal progressive in a blue suit, in a conservative outfit.
We call the equivalent here would be a rhino.
A rhino.
Or something like that.
You have rhinos. We have rhinos. Brexit and name only,
Right.
and all this kind of thing. And then to me,
Right.
Theresa May has always been a liberal socialist
Sure.
progressive in a blue coat, and once described the Tory party as the nasty party. Let's say it bluntly. The reason being, she said that, is because she was pushing children to be fostered by same-sex couples. That was the reason why she made that particular comment. Now, what we now have within the church, so we have number 2 within the Church of England, Cottrell, I'm sure will be pushing that. There is now going to be a move to push the church to see this as policy and marry gay couples in the church. There are gay priests who have been pushing all this and then having various ceremonies in. We've got that. We've got the whole transgender stuff of mental illness going on as well. Let's just say how it is. It doesn't make us popular, but then we've got that going on. So where is the division in the church? The division in the church is that and I have to confess, I don't go to a mainstream church. I do not go. A lot of my church is done on the phone. A lot of my church is done with fellowshipping, with conversations with people all around the world. I'm not saying that's ideal. It's not. And then I get on a plane and I go to conferences for my own mental health and to confirm that I'm not going round the bend, and actually to meet with other like-minded people, because there aren't that too many of us over here. So the state of it, we're not discussing prophecy. We're not discussing what is really, really going on. If we were to discuss politics on the Sunday, it'd be like, no, how can you do that? Remember, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Welby, came out very strongly for remaining in the EU and all this kind of thing. So the parallels are, you've got the parallels of someone like Welby going, well, we need to stay in the EU, and a bit like the parallel of Christianity Today hit piece coming out going, we need to get rid of Donald Trump, or other no-Trumpers who call themselves evangelical Christians. Now, let's just break this down. And I've had the privilege to go to a Trump rally, and I don't worship Donald Trump. Jesus is my Lord and Savior. That's it. And it just so happens that Donald Trump is president of the United States. And from here, I'm glad that he's president of the United States. Now, There are some questions sometimes in regard to negotiating the new Mexican-Canadian deal and NAFTA and GAFTA and all this, and some of the decisions, some of the people he has around them, whether they're big neocons and all this. Yes, there are concerns. But at the end of the day, if any Christian, let's say it how it is, any Christian that voted for Hillary Rodham Clinton, who believes in abortion, right up to the third trimester and all this, who, as far as I'm concerned, loads of dead bodies. I bought the Democratic Party. I've actually paid Christopher Steele a few via a particular company, Fusion GPS, to actually create a dossier and all this kind of thing. I have abused power. I have stood by my husband as he has abused and raped people like Janika Broderick, Kathleen Wiley, Jennifer Flowers, and abused Monica Lewinsky. Am I making any of this up? No, I am not. Or flying into Haiti and getting her mate out Slingsby, where prosecution for trying to child traffic up to 33 children, etc., etc., etc. Being mates with Harvey Weinstein, and all this kind of stuff. And then people go, well, how can you vote for Donald Trump? Christians, wake up, look at who this person is. As far as I'm concerned, as a private citizen, Donald Trump's never killed anyone. So where we're at, and then we have leaders like Mr. Compolo turning around saying, what's wrong with the 33,000 emails? Then you have leaders like Welby going, I think we need to stay within the European Union. We need to stay. Well, Welby, you don't do your research. You have no idea. You have no idea. If you say you're a true Christian, let's say it. I've said it. I have got myself into serious crap when I turn around and say, right, if you are a Bible-believing Christian, or if you're a Christian, Bible-believing Christian, and you voted to remain in the EU, you are not spiritually discerning. That doesn't go down very well, And so the parallels of this is that people have got their head in the sand. They don't realize that there's a spiritual battle going on like no other time in our history. We have these debates, we're not in the end times, none of this is going on. Yes, it is. Get with it. Or more importantly, we want peace, peace, peace. And I think as, 2 Peter 3, verse 3, I just read it today, so people think I'm this amazing theologian, where it talks about mocking, people mocking us, people scoffing us, scoffers, people then turning around and going, look, we don't know the day or the time that Jesus is going to return. We're not supposed to be looking into that. I say, we don't know the day or the time, but we are supposed to look at the signs. We are supposed to look up. We are supposed to get our lives and our crap together and do it as soon as we can. And more importantly, the Great Commission, and I get accused of just speaking to the choir, but when you speak to the choir, then the choir go and make another choir, and that enables them to expand their choir with people that are not part of the choir yet, but we drag them in. So it's about information. And when we go through that, so we see these parallels. We see the fact that in 1973, the British Council of Churches, 72, before Ted Heath took us in, was used as a body to convince people that, the EU is a good idea. This would have been a referendum we had in 1975, rather. They were used for that. So the churches are used for that. So it's all about, we want peace, peace now. It's kumbaya, cup of tea. Sorry, I am being very cynical. And I don't mean to sound that or be sarcastic. Well, but this is what's going on.
Yeah, here's the thing that I discovered, and something that I want to say to those, also to those folks who wake up and feel like they're alone. There's always, for the one person who is voicing what they think, there's 10 other people listening to them who are probably thinking the same thing. They just haven't found the courage to use their tongues to agree with you. And that's much like these programs here. There are many, I think, more people, even as I said last week, who wish that they had the courage to speak out more. They sit and they watch our programs in silence. Now, it's, as you said, the suppression is working against that, where people who are simply curious, quietly curious, to find information in shows like ours. That's why it's necessary to do as much as we can to tell people about programs like this, like Skywatch TV, like Hagman and Hagman,
Absolutely.
like Soaring Eagle Radio and Kingdom Intelligence Briefing. We have to do the part. We have to work that much harder to get these programs out. But there are people who will turn into these things, people that you and I may never suspect, that by our voice and being faithful in speaking one time in the midst of what looked to be a totally useless, wasted situation, who actually hear you. And the Father will use that then to prick their conscience to come find a program like this. They then will do their own research, and by the God's will and the conviction of the Holy Spirit, they became one of our numbers, right? We've added in one to the battle, and later on, their voice is added to the chorus. And so it's a matter of, Mark, what I started the show with is, right, and I think before we even went on the air, what I said to you, and said at the outset, your courage is encouraging to me. Your boldness and your faithfulness to travel halfway across, the world, simply to be a voice to telling Americans about American history from another country. It should be a conviction from the Holy Spirit for the Father to do that to begin with, that he's got to use a Brit to tell the U.S. Americans what their history is. But it's necessary, and it's encouraging to those of us who see folks like yourself to simply, you named off that you had gone to school once or twice in your testimony. You changed your trade, from carpenter to teacher to filmmaker. We're not going to mention your age, but
you can.
You weren't a
21.
No. Yeah, he's 22 next year, but carpentry's tough work. That's why he looks a little bit older than 22. But don't be afraid, is what we're saying, to be a voice. Don't be afraid to follow the calling that the Father has led you on, because whether you make short films, whether you're a carpenter, whether you're a teacher, anywhere that you are, you have a voice to not be silent. It's not to stand in the corner and be drowned out. You don't have to be hateful, but as Coach Dave likes to say, truth sounds like hate.
Well, absolutely. And there are, and Chad, there are a lot of people actually who aren't Christians who are actually awake. There are more people outside the church that are awake than actually inside the church, which sounds a bit ridiculous, but it's true. And thank you for what you said. Your flattery is appreciated, but I'm a small voice.
I know, but I know where you are, because in though many ways the UK, were the last front. That's because the truth of the matter is, Mark, you're in a very dark, spiritually speaking, place. People here say that they find themselves often alone, but let's face it, the church over there, has had a couple centuries ahead of the church over here to get where they're at in their organization, in the governmental setups and systems that you mentioned. The church and being co-opted and setting the pattern and learning how to do that before they model it over here. But I'm just saying it's easy when there are fewer voices next to you. And we're going to talk about a conference, thankfully, here before we go over, that's happening over closer to your neck of the woods for people who are near Mark over there in the UK. If you're in the UK and you're watching this, there is going to be a conference here next year in 2020 of hosting some of the people that we've mentioned.
Absolutely. Which is be in April this year. But no, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The fact is, you are the most amazing, biggest experimental in in people governing and self-governing in that sense, ever as a country, right? Because of what the Constitution says and how this is actually set up. It's phenomenal. right? And then when you haven't been teaching civics properly over the last 30, 40 years, you don't understand why your constitution is so important, why your country is set up in the way that you do. And I suppose my rabbit warren started, which meant I started, and I need to do this more, to look at your history. You know, one that is extremely relevant. Why did the American Marines, why were the American Marines created? The American Marines were created because of the attack on commercial shipping along the Mediterranean by jihadist groups. And then by 1808, you know, the Barbary Wars, and then you've got the Marines and on the road to Tripoli. Tripoli is in Libya. What happened a few years ago? You know, NATO, along with Barack Hussein Obama, Hillary Rodham Clinton, you know, Scarsozi, then the French leader, and Cameron, you know, let's go and bomb the heck out of Gaddafi, get rid of Gaddafi. I'm not defending Gaddafi, but as he said, if you get rid of me, you'll have mass immigration coming into Europe. Well, that was all planned, Mr. George Soros, wasn't it? So all of these kind of things, but going back to the history, the fact that the Marines would have leather on their collars to protect them from scimitars chopping their heads off. That's why the then president was reading a Quran to work out and going, what's going on? This is your history. And its understanding of what is your history have come about in regard to the Civil War and all the rest. And in regard to, as we look at this, what happened with the First World War, what happened when the Treaty of Versailles set up immediately that Germany would never recover. And then it leads into Hitler and it leads into that. And someone then says, I'm going to make Germans proud again. I'm not linking in a very wrong way, but we look at spiritually what was happening. We then look at the formation, you know, Israel coming about in 1948. None of these things are clearly discussed in the church, but as I've said, you have a legal population of 320. You might have and add another 20 million. You might have to add another 20 million to that of illegals. You then have got this situation where, you know, build a wall, and the Clintons have said it, Obama has said it, even though they then deny it. Chuck Schumer has said it, Pelosi has said it. We need to build a wall and stop and protect America. Because the Democrats just want all these free votes to come in. It's what you stand for, because in 1628, when I think John Bunyan was born, and then it's the Pilgrims, the fact that the Pilgrims come over for Europe on a Mayflower, another ship. And the reason why, because of religious persecution within Europe. And it's interesting when we look at people like Bunyan, who wrote Pilgrim's Progress. He wrote that book and others in jail for 9 years. This persecution of Christians in this country is happening. You can't say this, you can't say that. The Bible will become the hate book. So yes, you are the last bastion. If America goes down, then everyone has had it. Now, of course, you know, it's this whole, the left don't like the term British American exceptionalism. As Bush Senior said around about 92 as a quote, if the American people knew what we were up to in regard to the Council of Foreign Relations, etc., then they'll be chasing us down the road with, you know, their AR-15s. You touched on this. 63 million people voted for the President of the United States. The biggest insult of the flyover states. You have an electoral college for a reason, to make sure that Washington, people in, you know, New York, people in and then Washington, people in California, don't just choose your president all the time. Otherwise, that's why Indiana has certain number of electoral college votes and why an electoral college was put in. And you've got all these idiots who are going, we need to get rid of the electoral college. For crying out loud, I don't even live in the country, but I seem to understand more about how it functions because I'm passionate about it. And the church needs to be teaching all this.
Yes.
Sorry.
Well, I think that just voices to the point of the state of the war that we are currently at. The fact that they feel bold enough to suggest this, even as a possibility, instead of whispering it behind a closed door anymore, speaks to their actual hatred of anybody who disagrees. We see this being played out on independent media, not on globalist media, but on independent media. We're seeing it all the time, how those who would voice an opinion against the true twisting of God's natural order, anybody who would stand in that, are physically assaulted.
Yes, they are.
Let's not kid ourselves.
Yes,
The
they are.
people who are stirring these people up, they feel that way too. They would
Well, absolutely. I mean,
have the freedom
yeah.
to just physically round up anybody who disagrees with them, and either put us away somewhere, or truthfully, what's in their hearts, to take our lives. The point is, it needs to be said, because that is exactly what they would love to do if they could get away with it, and know that rather than repercussions, it would be something celebrated, to get rid of these voices who would dim their parties, who would dim their joy and their sin and their lustful ways and their baby killing. If they could get rid of that voice that speaks out against this, why then your utopias would be able to move on and finally get to their enlightened states, right?
But this is absolutely, and that's what they're pushing for. Brave New World, 1984 is not supposed to be a manual, but it is. And then we have War of the Worlds. All of this is real. And just quickly, because I know we're running out of time, but it's like we look at it occurred to me that I didn't realize this the other day. We look at Darwinism. We look at the fact that his bulldog was Henry Thomas Huxley, who was his grandchildren. Aldous Huxley was his grandchild, who Brave New World and all this. In other words, doing the research, we realize with books where we discover that Wall Street finances the Bolshevik Revolution, finances Karl Marx going back. Do the research. Get out there. I'll say this. You and I and others, we get criticized for what we say. We've done our research. Go and do the research. Don't believe me. Go and do the research. As the Bible says, be like a Berean. Go and do the research and find it out for yourself. And if you don't believe us, climate change, man-made climate change, one big socialist ruse. Go and do the research. CO2, trees take it in and they produce oxygen. For crying out loud, it's a scientific fact.
And then I'm saying, take it this step further. You watching, be the next Mark Sutherland, someone who can no longer find it comfortable to sit there and know all of this and not say something about it in whatever manner of gift you've been given. Do something with that, whether it's write a book, start a blog, repent, or do all you can, be the next Audrey RV, starting the Remnant Online Fellowship. We're gathering voices where people who feel alone can find like-minded people they can talk to and not feel like they're going around the bend. Whatever it is, once you've been woken up, what are you doing with that? Are you going to be comfortable just sitting there? And the answer is, truthfully, if you've been convicted by the information you learned, the truth is, no, you can't. You're either going to have to bury your head in the sand and go full bore into this world to try to find any means you can to forget about what you've been shown, or you're going to have to do something about it. The time for sitting on the fence is no more.
Absolutely.
Everywhere is a disputed land. Everywhere is a disputed land. Now, before we go, because we're about out of time, I do want to share, if you want to, let's see, choose here, choose there, and there we are. This, I'll try to blow it up here. Let's see if I can blow that up on the screen to make it easier here. I'll have to blow it up, and then I'm going to have to scroll here. But you have this Scottish Bible Prophecy Conference. It's going to be held April 24th, 25th, and 26th. And scrolling down here, you can see you have these folks here who are going to be speaking. You have Billy Crone, Derek and Sharon Gilbert, Stephen Wright. I don't know him. I've Jim Barfield. this is no small thing, is it,
No,
Mark?
not at all. And my dear friend Juan up in Scotland has really been pushing this. This is going to be happening in Troon in Scotland on those dates. Find me. There is this conferences online on Facebook. Otherwise, find me, trace me through Remnant Online, and we can steer people to buy it. I think there's information on there where you can go and buy tickets. No, it is no mean thing, because this thing needs to happen. It means that other people, if you're listening to us in Europe, then it means you can fly in from Europe. And as I said, this is not a hobby. We are at utter war. Those that know me know I'm in the middle of it, and all of you are. We are at war. And we have to engage.
And to those who are going to be listening to over there, and you've been silent, you've been watching from the sidelines, find the courage now, today, to plan. It's in April, okay? So that's only 4 months away, right? It's not long away. Find the courage now to go to this. Maybe you don't tell anybody you're taking a vacation, right? I don't know what they call it over there. If you're here, you take a vacation. Don't tell anybody that are around you, because you know they're going to think you're crazy. That happens here more often than you know. That people show up at conferences and they say, if my family knew I was here, they would put me in a straitjacket and lock me up right away. Okay, fine. Be that person over there in the UK, and go over there and be amongst people who think and hear the way you do, so that you may be encouraged to eventually, hopefully, find the strength to be the voice you need to be. And you know it. And you know it in your heart. As I say it, you guys know it in your heart that you need to be a voice. And what you see happening around you it's not right. And the truth, as has been spoken here tonight, is resounding loudly in your hearts and your minds. Mark,
Absolutely.
It's time for the show to end. It's 3 a.m. in the UK there. Bless you so much for staying up as late as you have to talk with us American chaps over here, and to be a voice over there for us. We together, the Take on the World family, are praying for you. We love you. We thank you for doing what you're doing. And I want you to be encouraged. I'm going to be their voice on their behalf, to be encouraged that we are praying for you to keep doing what you're doing. You're not alone. And we thank you. Just keep doing it. We'll support you.
Chad, thank you. And if one final word on that, there is this feature film, Orbiter the movie. We're trying to get off the ground. We are this close. Please just pray about that. We're going to make it in the US, but it's a 3D faith-based film. We need to get it in cinemas. We need to use all this stuff, all this access that we have to all these skills. But thank you for what you said. Genuinely, it is very, very humbling. I'm a small voice, but we have incredible connections around the world, and things need to happen. There is a pushback.
If people want to join you in the support of this movie to get this thing launched, how's the best way to contact you?
Well, the best way to contact me, just email me, marksutherland26@gmail.com. Just email me.
Mark Sutherland
26@gmail.com. Sorry, my website's down, but if you email me like that, or find me on Facebook, message me. I'm now back on Facebook. Then message me. All right.
Yeah. If you're connected with Friends of Me, he'll be in my friends list there. Again, just support him. Send Mark your love. Let him know that you watched the show, you enjoyed it. Be an encouragement for him this week, guys. And thank you for joining us again for another Monday night on Disputed Lands. My name is Chad Schaefer. This has been Disputed Lands on Take on the World TV. And I haven't got the guest lined up next week, but I think it may be another good one if I can secure that tomorrow. Until we see you next time, thank you and God bless. And thanks for being here.
Thank you.